having thought this through, I think the beacons of the 248K mod are my favorite part of the game design of this mod. It gives us 3 different beacons at different tech levels with different requirements at different effect sizes. And so let's talk about how those differ from regular beacons, which also still exist in the 248K mod, and why I like them as game design. So yeah, a lot of the common recipes have more or less the same recipes, like yellow science, different icon, one new thing. Green chips, identical. So there are other places where we have to worry about the overhaul mod thing of here are new ingredients, figure out how to belt those in, but a lot of the 248K stuff is the same pattern with just a different geometry if you're trying to beacon stuff effectively, because these new beacons are doing new beacon things. And yes, the existing beacons are here, but we're kind of incentivized to use the new ones because in a bunch of ways they're just better. And beacons have been around for a while. Like, there's a lot of patterns where we know how to use beacons well. Like the radius is like it matches the size of a building, but also you want to offset it slightly so you can like hit the maximum number of buildings with things. This is like a fairly common late game pattern where you've got all these beacons lined up hitting 8 buildings, and so each building is hit by 8 beacons and each beacon is hitting 8 buildings, and because it's a mod we actually need to give these things some other ingredients. But most of the inputs and outputs for this, even in the 248K mod, are, pretty much what we'd expect. And then the other really common in-game way of using beacons, this is a bad example because I kind of slapped it together quickly, is surrounding a bunch of beacons to get as much beaconing on any particular assembler as possible to reduce the UPS while maximizing throughput because late game bases, and then to be able to tile this stuff and all of those kinds of things. So the 248K mod shakes this up in a couple of ways. First of all, we've got 3 different sizes of beacons, none of which are the same size and effective radius as vanilla. We've also then got a limit on the total number of beacons we can have, so we can't just spam beacons everywhere. Then there's also these beacon cores which distribute their effects to the beacons in a slightly complicated way that we don't need to worry about now. But these also have fluid inputs, which in a lot of cases take quite expensive materials in order to generate the fluids that the beacon cores need, and you have to continuously supply these fluids, otherwise you lose some of the beacon effects. So all of that is, just a different way of shaking up the costs of beacons. There's these individual beacons are a bit cheaper, and we also don't have to put modules in them. We only have to put modules in the middle of these buildings. But so we save a lot on the upfront costs of beacons. We have an ongoing cost of different kinds of fluids. The earlier tier 1 beacons only need fewer of the fluids, and some of the later fluids get added later. And so this changes a bunch of things about how we use beacons well. Let's talk about a couple of things that were like a little bit annoying about beacons first. So things I noticed is you can, if you remove a beacon core, I currently don't. Okay, let's get rid of all my stuff to demonstrate this. If I remove a beacon core, the modules that were in the middle of the core just disappear into the void. I've only got the K1 core. I no longer have the beacons to put in the K1 core, whereas in this case the modules are still here. This works for this is what happens for all of these cores, which is a little bit inconvenient. Secondly, I was generally under the impression that if I built another core that it would give me another set of beacons, but it turns out that this maximum number of supported beacons is across all channels. So this interface is a little clunky as well. If we change this one to channel 2, then we can see on this core 230 linked beacons. This one make this 1 linked beacon. So this one is on beacon on channel 2, but we still haven't got any more beacons, which kind of surprised me when I looked at this stuff, because adding more cores, kind of low value then. The only thing it does is get you more of these cubes which you need to research stuff. And I guess the other feedback point about that is, for any particular beacon, it's kind of tricky to figure out what channel it's on, and also different channels didn't really add that much value. All they let you do is have a different collection of beacons in here, but it's still only speed and efficiency modules. Like, we don't have more modules to put in here to make having several channels like any particularly more interesting or more valuable. I did find that multiple K2 cores and multiple K3 cores are a big deal for getting these cubes out, but it also kind of plays interestingly with having a tick multiplier, which in this run I do, because I want to build more of these cores to get out more cubes which I need for my tick multiplier, which means I need to make more of these fluids, but then also the additional cores are providing no value because I don't get any more beacons, but also because I'm running a tick multiplier, I'm a bit larger and I want more beacons and I can't have them. So all of that is a bit weird. The other last thing was, if I had an upgrade planner, this one was kind of an accidental thing that was a bit weird, which isn't going to work so well now. Oh no, I've still got speed ones, it's fine. That if I had some speed 1 effects in a beacon, I can upgrade plan the beacon, which is weird, because the modules are... Okay, so it did actually... Yeah, I don't even know... I wasn't expecting the bots to be able to do that, because these things don't actually have modules in them, but somehow I have now spent speed 3 modules on a K1 beacon, which is still associated with the channel, which has now got different beacons to what's in the core. So that's just weird. Yeah, not a big deal. Just try to avoid upgrade planning your beacons, I guess. So what do we do with all of these? What kind of things? What does it change with the gameplay? Well, suppose we had something like, I guess I would call this a fairly standard linear speedrunner kind of pattern. We've got all the things we need to make engines into all the things we need to make blue science in this kind of linear way that's kind of easy. I mean, maybe these ones should also be red and this should be one further back, whatever. Because it's a mod, we need a couple of extra things. Actually, it's not ceramics, is it? It's not even ceramics at all. It is the ceramic composite that we need. Get rid of all of these. Yeah, the ceramic composite is the thing we need to make engines, and so now this will run. And then these guys also need more of the crystals. But the point being, even in the 24AK mod, it's not too tricky to use the same early patterns to cobble together blue science. But because the beacons are different, we can just immediately slide some beacons in here, and that's not usually a thing that we're able to do. So these small beacons we even get at red-green science, so it's not even like we can beacon things early. They kind of fit into interesting and weird patterns. If we put an underground in here, we could even get, I mean, okay, so that's where beacons normally go anyway. So yeah, then I guess the next thing that I was playing with was, okay, so if we're just thinking about the beacons, where can we put beacons? And this is this is a pretty normal red circuits pattern. We've got the ceramics over here, which is the thing we need for the red circuits. Everything else is normal red circuit stuff. And so we could have beacons in here. We can fit 2 of these beacons in between undergrounds. But it turns out that's not actually too great, because each of these beacons is hitting only 3 assemblers. And unlike this is why it's taking a long while to pick up, unlike a regular beacon, which we could fit in here and hit 8 assemblers each, which is cool, because these beacons are smaller, we can't hit both sides at the same time. And then also, if we move it even to one side, we drop some of those assemblers from the beacon coverage. So the best thing to do here, for some values of best, is we can actually have the beacon effect radius hang over one of the other beacons and hit beacons on the other side as well. But also now this doesn't kind of fit in So this is also like, is this a good thing to be doing? I mean, ways to hack beacons into builds to make them a little bit better, but again, open geometric questions of the good ways to do things. Like we can fit a K2 beacon here, a Ki2 beacon in here because it's also 3x3, but like the edges of these effects radiuses are not great, because if we moved this one tile to the right, we would be able to hit more assemblers with the same beacons, but then we can't get the inputs into the red chips. And then Ki3 beacons are going to hit all of these things in a way that's great, but there's also just a lot of effect radius coverage that we're also kind of missing, so maybe we could design things for that better as well. And I think I like the fact that most of these recipes are pretty much, let's get this garbage out of my inventory, most of these recipes are pretty much the same. So especially when I'm running a 10 times tech multiplier, I've got the time to figure out how I want to change these builds and figure out the nice geometric puzzle of like, where's a good place for this beacon, where's a good place for this beacon, and change builds as I'm running through the game. Geometric problems are really nice to engage with because you can just see where the effect radius is, figure out how you want to build things around it. And so then the next kind of pattern was realizing, wait, if I've got these beacons with decent ranges, I can kind of overhang these over just like normal linear belt things, and then there are different places where each tier of beacon is good. Like the tier 2 beacons, we can have hitting 4 assemblers, okay, fine, and then maybe another build, you know, on the other side up here, whatever. The tier 3 beacons, we want, like, we don't want to straddle assemblers in the same way that we do with normal beacons. We want to line these up with the assemblers, because that way they hit 5 on each side. And also, because their effect radius is longer, we can have these things with 2 belts, and then still hitting the assemblers. So that's this also gives us kind of tileable things, which is why we're doing this with LDS, because LDS has huge build speed, and we can now line a bunch of these things up, and we've got nice simple builds that we can just upgrade some belts, make a bunch of this larger, go nice and fast. I can't reach. So that was, yeah, and then when we get back into the tier 3, when we get tier 3 beacons, we want to have these, like the place where we kind of straddling 2 of these assemblers either side. This is a 4x4 building, like the hitboxes versus the art. Like it's not clear that this corner is used, but it is. We can't put anything in this corner. But we can arrange this radius so that we're hitting 6 buildings. But when we do that, we can't, like, here's not a good place. We've got to shuffle these over again. So these beacons aren't perfectly tiling, but they're still getting a lot of work done. But I think the most interesting place, okay, there's 2 really interesting places, is doing direct insertion endgame stuff. Because, okay, when we've got these little 2 beacons, like these will go in pretty normal places. When we get the tier 2 beacons, we can put these in places, because they have effect radius 4, we can put them in places where the effect radius will hit not just an assembler, but an assembler immediately behind the assembler, which means maybe we want to arrange all of this stuff slightly differently to be able to get as many beacons on these things as possible. Like if we did this kind of nonsense, we still need to worry about these inputs. Also, maybe sometimes some of these builds, the copper or the iron might go in or out the sides. But now we've got a lot of beacons hitting these green chips in patterns that are kind of unusual and different, and we have to think about the geometry again. But then it changes when we get the tier 3 beacons. Yeah, here's where it goes. Because once we get these effect radiuses, we can hit not just close beacons, or not just close assemblers, but assemblers that are on, like, the other side of inserters of the direct feeding thing. So this beacon here is hitting all of these assemblers. So maybe we can even do, like if we can do something like this, and then figuring out how the belts fit is, okay, that one's in the wrong place. Figuring out how the belts fit is going to be another whole mess, but we can get a lot of beacons on a lot of these guys, and in fact, if we did an underground here, this gap, okay, this guy's kind of in the wrong place, but okay, he's still in the wrong place. We can have more beacons here and be getting, yeah, a lot of beacon space. Like the ways to maximize the beacon impact on direct insertion builds is also something that's just a bunch of new problems. And then how do we get, because this is actually only, this one doesn't work because there's only these two spaces here, which means these green chips don't have space for both an input and an output. So that's fun. And then I think the most obscene, extreme version of this that I was playing around with is, if maybe we're doing a Logimore thing, maybe we have an assembler here, maybe we have, if we're doing Logimore things, then this is all the inputs and outputs we need. We just have chests of the appropriate type in these two places. And the other place we can do this is labs, because we only need one. If we're Logibotting stuff into labs, we only need one inserter going into labs. But the way that beacon effect radiuses overhang beacons means that we can have pairs of beacons next to each other that are both hitting a bunch of buildings on either side, and really beacon some things hard if we need to, like this. These are even with the K2 beacons, but this beacon in the middle is hitting, what, 10 labs, and this beacon is also hitting 10 labs, and these two labs in the middle are being hit by all 10 beacons. Like this beacon here is hitting the two labs, this beacon here is hitting these two labs, and this is a quite outrageous lab speed to be working with, and also to be able to have 10 labs that are hit by 10 beacons, each of which are conferring multiple beacon effects. So I mean, this lets us go fast, which is cool, because the 248K mod has a lot of stuff to do, but also means that we have to reevaluate all of the problems again, and like just the standard ways of mega basing with a lot of beacons don't quite work the same way, and we have to rethink all those problems again, which is a nice change. I didn't even know what I want to do with, definitely I want green chips beaconed somehow, and these KI3 beacons are fantastic, but figuring out how to use them well is interesting new challenge I like.